So today, episode 5, we're talking about the road to the national championship, part 1. So we're going to focus a lot on the off season. Last week, you touched on becoming a leader your sophomore and junior year, and you talked about a great story with the tornado and having to navigate through that. And we'll get to all that in just a second. But I read a story this week, and I actually thought of you and Jake Epstein, the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. And the first thing I thought of, what you guys as coaches, what you have to go through. This story was about Sean McVay. It was written, I forget who it was written by, so I apologize, but it was on ESPN.com this week. And there's a couple of things that stuck out, and I want to get your opinion on this. There's a quote that he said, McVay, to the reporter that I can't, it sticks in my brain. The quote was, "I'm happiest when I'm unhappy."
Hmm.
And to me, Sean McVay, being as successful as he is at such a young age, he's actually only a couple of years older than us. He probably would have been like a senior if he was on our collegiate teams. And for him to have as much success as he's had, getting inside the mind of a coach, sometimes we look at some of these coaches, these players, as simple people, very, very simple people. But there's a paradox to that where they're so simple, yet they're very complicated in their profession, meaning coaching. And I think that quote, "happiest when unhappy," kind of solidifies my opinion on that.
It almost reminds me of the best talk about feeling addicted to stress. And if they didn't feel that tiny tremor of stress, that almost made them feel like they were comfortable and that they were sitting back and that, well, there has to be more I need to be doing. And, that dissatisfaction of like, well, there's always more, there's always more, there's always more. And when they are in that state of like desiring more and pushing for more, that is when they are happiest, maybe. So I don't know. That is interesting. And that is an interesting, I think, balance that we're all trying to figure out. Where does the happy medium exist?
Yeah. Because for those who don't know, I've been asked before, unfortunately, for the coaching profession across America and the world. If I was a coach on my other podcast, I'm not. I can't do what you guys do. And what you guys do is very, very hard. But notwithstanding, it feels like I've gotten into the mind of plenty of coaches. I've talked to many of friends who are coaches, and it feels like to me there's a never-ending to-do list with you guys, with coaches. We have to do this. We have to do this. One of the things that was highlighted in the article about Sean McVay was that he had a list of 200 clips that he had to watch. And instead of going to bed, he went to his office and watched those clips. And it just feels like you guys are never really finished. And I think it's that competitive edge that coaches have that you just can't really get rid of. It's kind of somebody told me this before, working in sports, a baseball manager, actually working in sports or whatever you're doing. It's a lifestyle, and coaching is right atop of that.
You know what? It's actually that right there is probably one of the reasons I decided not to go into coaching a team as my career. I coach at a private level, but it almost felt like a little bit like an illness that I almost didn't know how to treat, where it wasn't, it was almost preferable to not have family in town. It was almost preferable to not have friends. It was almost preferable to just be in my lane and focus on what I have to do. And every single waking moment of my day was dedicated to that. And it's very difficult to come out of that. And then I almost, when you retire, obviously when you're done playing, you're like, okay, how do I function now? And I felt that if I picked coaching on a team as a profession, I might have not been able to balance myself as well. And that would have probably been the only thing I would have dedicated myself to. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I just knew that that wasn't what I wanted for my entire life. But I did feel that.
Yeah, and this as a Yankees fan. The Yankees do something in their player development. I think a lot of teams are starting to pick up on this in Major League Baseball. And obviously, the NFL has been doing it for years. The NBA. The Yankees, though, they set a program aside in their player development department to take former players who certainly weren't going to make it to the major leagues. They were guys who probably were going to cap out at AA. They're organizational guys, as it were. And those guys, Kevin Reese, for example, even though he did make it to the major league level with the Yankees, but he certainly didn't make much of an impact, he has become the director of player development with the Yankees. And a lot of the former players in the minor leagues, they go into coaching, but there's a program for them to learn. NFL Films has a great broadcasting program for former players as well, where they learn everything about how to broadcast, whether it be podcasting, radio, television. They go through that boot camp, and the Yankees have something very similar with players transitioning to being coaches, because I think a lot, and you can speak to this, I think a lot of people, a lot of former players, any sport, they go into retirement thinking, okay, I'm going to go into coaching now, but there's so much more than just teaching. Teaching is the main vital part, I would think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's so much more, so many little skills you have to learn to become the most successful coach you can be.
Yeah, I think it does depend on the type of coach you want to be. I love the teaching aspect of it. There's other who love the progressional aspect, where they want to take someone from when they're younger and progress. And then I think there's certain coaches that are just really good managers and of different personalities, and they like bringing people together. Not that they lack completely in other skills. It's just that's the one that rises to the top. So I do think it depends on the type of coach. But yeah, at least at the private level, if you're having people come in on a one-on-one or a small group scale, teaching and progressing has to be probably the forefront of what you're at least passionate about to learn more about and get better at, for sure.
So I'm going to tell you a quick little story here. I think this is, one of many that I'm sure we'll progress through as we move along here with the show and each episode. When I worked for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I was working 6 days a week a couple of years ago. I worked for the Buccaneers doing game day assistant as their communications department. So I got to, go down to the locker room, post game, pre-game, and whatnot. And anyway, getting that chance to do that, I saw a lot of coaches in the way the NFL operates. And I got a chance to run into Bruce Arians, right? Everybody thinks Tom Brady is the guy you walk on eggshells around. So the aura of Tom Brady knows the aura of Bruce Arians, cross the boss. And the one thing I noticed about Arians, he's very simple, but he's also so laser focused and so competitive. And you just see it in his eyes, that fire, that competitive fire, wanting to win. That when people ask, why would coaches ever go into that profession? Because it's such an unbalanced profession. Because you never know when you're going to get fired. You never know when you're going to lose your job, your livelihood. It's going to be uprooted. But I understand it because I got to see some of the best coaches across sports. I'm talking to one right now that live that lifestyle of having that competitive fire, I think 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I think I had mentioned it when I was trying to figure out where I was going to go to college. Do I stay home? Do I go to a smaller school, or do I go for it at Alabama? And I think these coaches and people who find themselves in those positions know, what, if I don't do this, if I don't give it a go, I'm going to have that tug at me every time I go to bed at night, where it's like, well, could I have done this? Like, I had the opportunity to experience this, to potentially win this, to do something, and I didn't take it. I just wonder if that's where they'll feel.